What is up, fight fans? We are live on MMA Weekly, and this is UFC Fallout. I'm Jim Grieshaber, call me Gries, along with my guy, Jeff Cain. Jeff's been busy. Man, a lot of content coming out lately on MMAWeekly.com. Little bit of a lull in the UFC schedule after the huge pay-per-view at UFC 263 a couple of weeks ago, and heading into the big one coming up in July, of course, in Vegas. First one back at T-Mobile Arena with all the fans. Of course, headlined by the notorious Conor McGregor. Big fights in between weekend with a really big win over Dan Ige, and then of course this coming weekend Cyril Gane and Alexander Volkov in the heavyweight division. But the biggest story, as you see on your screen, is Anderson Silva, the Spider. He wasn't winning in the octagon, Jeff. The UFC let him go, and they said no more Anderson Silva, but he gets into the boxing ring and he picks up a huge win over Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. And everybody's talking about Anderson Silva, man. You want to get a retired MMA fighter to win a boxing match? There's your guy. Anderson Silva got it done.
Yeah, he just for those. I mean, he just outworked him. He threw more, landed more, but landed at a less percentage, But he just outworked Chavez, man. I mean, that's all that come down to. But Anderson didn't look bad in there. I mean, he's probably going to get another boxing match, and we'll see who he fights now.
Yeah.
Interesting though, you know.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things when I look at him and I think about what he's done in his career, and obviously his legacy is cemented, Jeff. Anderson Silva's Anderson Silva. His legacy is cemented, set in stone, no matter how many fights he lost at the end of his UFC career. One of those guys who just keeps going. But for him to go out and pick up that win, now I will say this, Chavez missed weight, came into it lazy. I don't think Chavez was really in it to fight. I don't think he was taking it seriously. And I will say this about Jake and Logan Paul. They do take it seriously. They do train very seriously. And I think we're going to see more of these fights as time goes by. In fact, in the interview that's going to drop this week on MMA Weekly, I just did with Henry Cejudo, he talks about Floyd Mayweather. I said, hey, Floyd's a bronze medalist. Why don't you fight Oscar De La Hoya? Gold versus gold, Triple C and Oscar De La Hoya. He loved that idea. And in fact, he just did a podcast with him and he was going to bring it up to him. But I like the idea. Retired fighters fighting retired fighters. If MMA fighters want to keep boxing, great. But Henry had an awesome point too. When I talked to him, he said, hey, we'll meet you in the boxing ring. We'll meet you on your turf. We'll meet you on your terms even. But you know what I mean? Like, let's throw in a little bit here and there, like a little round here and there, maybe a couple elbows, maybe something like that. But maybe one round of MMA. But it'll be interesting to see where this goes from here, Jeff, because it definitely is here to stay. It's gaining a lot of steam and a lot of traction. We're going to see paydays for retired fighters, which I know you love and I love too. And you know what? I do feel a sense of pride when one of our MMA fighters beats a boxer because we're fighting them in their sport, right? Their sport. It's not an MMA fight. It's not anything against the MMA fighters when they lose. But at the same time, it is something. It's a pride thing. So when a guy like Anderson Silva goes in there and beats a guy like Chavez, even though it was junior, I mean, obviously that's something that, you look at and you say, hey, Chavez was out of shape. He came in, he missed weight. And then he says he deserved a draw. If it's even close enough to be a draw against a retired MMA fighter like Anderson Silva, he should be embarrassed of himself and just take that L. But a big win, a big win. And there's a lot of pride in the MMA community, Jeff. I know you're not buying into it. We talk about it all the time. But there's a lot of pride in our sport. And MMA fighters think they can go in and beat boxers. And Tyron Woodley wants to take Jake Paul's head off. It's all real. But so far, it hasn't been real good for the MMA fighters in boxing. And, Anderson Silva sort of turned that tide a little bit.
Anderson Silva made his boxing debut in 1998. This isn't.
That's a long time ago.
New. Yeah. Israel Adesanya is undefeated in boxing. KJ Noons, Chris Lytle, Jens Pulver. This isn't new. It's just new to the new fans. I mean, we've seen boxers go other ways, I mean, when you want to talk about boxers coming into MMA and beating people's ass, all you got to do is look at Holly Holm. Yeah.
Yep.
And so this isn't new. It's just that it's just like the media, the mainstream media is just now figured out, just now stumbled on it because of a couple of YouTube guys. But this has literally been going on for forever. I mean, Big Nog Nogueira was on the Brazilian Olympic national boxing team. There's been this crossover for forever. But Anderson picked up that win, and where it's I think where it's becoming relevant in the sport is what you brought up. We're going to see retired mixed martial artists extend their career in boxing, and
Yeah.
and they can do that because it's a lot less. It takes less toll on you in training. Put it that way. You're not taking leg kicks. You're not getting taken down. You're not blocking kicks with your arms. You're just boxing. Um, but yeah, I mean, people get caught up into this, but it's kind of crazy. Look, they're two different sports. If you want to go box, go box. Keep the rules the same. You want to come fight MMA, fight MMA. You want to do kickboxing, go fight kickboxing. There's always this crossover between all three of those sports, and even wrestling and jiu-jitsu. But recently, it's getting big coverage. Mainly because I mean, I guess it's probably because of Conor McGregor and Floyd, right?
Yeah. Conor and Floyd. Conor opened the door for everybody, and UFC was a big part of that. And now the Paul brothers. I mean, let's be real. The Paul brothers are making a lot of people a lot of money, most of all themselves. But I mean, we've talked about this a lot. And you look at Jake Paul, and I've been one who said it's embarrassing that Ben Askren lost to Jake Paul, but we'll see, because the story hasn't been written all the way yet, Jeff. You know this. You're an editor. The story's not even halfway through, because Jake and Logan Paul are going to keep boxing. They're eventually going to box real boxers and not just UFC fighters. And then we're going to see how their careers turn out. Do I think Jake or Logan Paul is going to be a boxing champion? Hell no. Do I know what their career holds in store? I would never bet against them. They became number one in the world at what they've done. They've built that huge following. They're making tens of millions of dollars. They're getting paydays for all. Look, Oscar De La Hoya wanted to box GSP. UFC won't let him. So instead, it'll be Vitor Belfort. Vitor's always there, so he'll get the payday. But you're going to see more of this, man. And I like it. I think it's cool. I'm with you. I like the paydays for people. If a guy's retired and he has a chance to go make a couple $1 million or even a few $100,000, whatever the case may be, I don't want to hold it against him. Now, does that mean I want to see Chuck and Tito again and Olstead? No, I don't want to see old guys beating the crap out of each other and risking permanent damage. Like Chuck did not belong in the cage against Tito that last time.
I think I got Jim frozen, or maybe
I like
maybe
the opportunities for them to make money. Jeff?
Yeah, no, I either froze or you
me.
froze, or we had a little glitch right there. Well, I mean, it's a viable. I mean, that's uh, it's an outlet for retired mixed martial artists to get big paydays,
Mm-hmm.
as long as they're not under UFC contract and held hostage to them after you're retired. Um, like I said, I mean, it's good for the fighters. They're like I said, it's a lot less rigorous to prepare for a boxing match than it is to prepare for an MMA fight or a kickboxing match or a wrestling match. Or probably even a jiu-jitsu match, just because you don't have the takedowns. You're just literally dealing with hands. And so you get your cardio up real well, and then work on your footwork and head movement, and bing, you're in there. But yeah, I think we're going to see more people do it. Vitor, and I don't know what Vitor looks like. Vitor, I don't think has looked the same since they took the TRT from him.
Right.
But then again, Oscar De La Hoya is far from the Oscar De La Hoya that was dominating boxing. But that's probably going to do well. But what boxing is going to come in. Going to run into problems is there's only so many Anderson Silvas. The name value is going to, because Ben Askren didn't sell that fight. That was a Jake Paul against a random retired UFC fighter. That nobody knows who Ben Askren is outside of the MMA and wrestling community. And so we're going to run out of names.
And the disc golf. Don't forget the disc golf world. You and him.
Yeah.
I want to see this, Jeff. I want to see you and Funky Ben. I want to. This has to happen. Scott, we have to make this happen. Jeff Cain, Ben Askren, disc golf.
Yeah, I mean, I'm down, man. But yeah, he has a damn disc golf course in his backyard. That sort of scares me a little bit, but that's okay. I'll get it.
That's it. Go house and beat his ass, like in school. Like in school, when you wanted to fight a kid and you got off the bus at his bus stop. I remember that happened to me once. A sixth grader got off at my bus stop to kick my ass, and I was in fourth grade. And he followed me to my house and beat me up in my yard. And that kind of left an impression on me. I'm like, there's something about going to someone's house and kicking their ass right in their own yard. And that would be something, right? I mean, that would make it even more special.
Yeah, but it stacks the odds in his favor. Stacks them in his favor. But yeah, but you know what I'm saying? I think that we're going to run out of viable names for boxing. I mean, you can only call out so many people that there's only one Conor McGregor, and so and there's only one Anderson Silva, and now we're down to Vitor. I don't know how much interest there's going to be in those matchups once we go down the list of name value of retired MMA fighters. I just don't know how many fights there are that they're going to sell those type of numbers. Now Jake and Logan
This might
Paul
be
are
Oscar's
sell-
toughest job as a promoter. This might be Oscar's toughest sell. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean he's going to have to sell himself first of all, and with all the baggage that he has surrounding him, and then he's going to have to sell Vitor Belfort, who I mean Vitor's a legend in MMA, but I don't know if the boxing community really knows who he is. I mean they can sell it. Vitor has the accolades. He's the youngest fighter to win a UFC tournament.
Yeah.
He's a former light heavyweight champion, and then, you just play the rock hold and Bisping knockouts. If you can get the footage from the UFC, I mean, you can bill him, but it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough because basically, Vitor was never that huge star. He was never Anderson. He was never Randy even,
Right.
Or Chuck or Tito. And so I don't know how well that's going to do. And then look, Oscar De La Hoya is probably not as popular as Jake and Logan Paul is at this point. He's taken a lot of his reputation has taken a lot of hits over the years.
Do you think he's going to be able to sell anything? I don't think this fight sells. I think Oscar just continues to humiliate himself, and I feel bad for him because he's a legend. He's an absolute legend, and he's a perfect example of, and he tries as a promoter, and I give him all the credit in the world, but it's hard being a promoter, man. And if, he's just not very good at it. Oh, and it's very tough to do. And he's made some enemies along the way. But, Oscar De La Hoya is a true legend. Anderson Silva's a legend. Like you said, I don't know if Vitor's a big enough draw on that side. I mean, Conor McGregor against anyone. One day McGregor will probably fight in one of these fights. I don't know. I doubt it'll be against one of the Paul brothers, but McGregor will probably do it again to make that money. Mayweather will probably do it again to make that money. But can Oscar De La Hoya do what Floyd Mayweather has done and make that money? I don't know if he can. I mean, look, if he fought the YouTube kids, that's one thing. But a guy like Vitor Belfort, I mean, GSP, I think, would have done pretty well on pay-per-view. I think I'm with you. I don't think Vitor is going to sell a lot with Oscar. And one thing that stands out to me, Jeff, is I interviewed Vitor about 3 months ago now. He was here at Fight Ready with his son, who's now, by the way, committed to Alabama. Davy Belfort, a quarterback, hasn't even played a high school game. He committed to play for the Alabama Crimson Tide. But Vitor's dream is creating a sport that combines boxing and MMA into one. And that's why he's doing this. So Vitor's trying to create a sport that combines the two. I know for a fact that that's his motivation. So I find that to be interesting, a sport that combines the two. Not sure what it'll look like. Vitor was telling me a little bit about it, but this is kind of a gateway to that for him. But if I'm Oscar De La Hoya, Jeff, I just embrace it at this point. He was a mess on that last Triller show, and it was a shame to see him like that. I mean, everybody's up there smoking weed, so I guess kind of blends in. He gets away with it a little more, but he's got a lot of demons, and he's got a lot of issues in his life, and I just want Oscar De La Hoya to be okay, because he gave us a lot of greatness over the years, and it's easy to forget that when you're ripping on someone, when you're making fun of someone for the way that they live their lives. But none of us have ever been through, and you've seen this a lot, Jeff, more than I have. I've seen it in every sport. You've seen it more with fighters. The hardest thing in the world for any athlete is the day when they realize they're not the same anymore. When they realize they don't have the skills they used to have. They don't have the quickness, the speed. They can't do what it is they've done that's been their identity from the time they were knee-high to a grasshopper. That all ends one day. Some adjust to it better than others. Obviously, Oscar's never really adjusted to it all that well, even when he was still fighting. He's had a lot of demons. He's had a lot of issues. I hope that he gets his life back on track. I hope this is a big success for him. And I hope he starts to go in that right direction. Because, like I said, man, he's an Olympic gold medalist. He's an all-time great. And you just want guys like that to be okay once the sport that made them who they are goes away. And like we were just saying, maybe it never has to go away, because there's always going to be a market for fights like this.
Yeah, I mean, Oscar's got an uphill battle because he's not Mike Tyson. You know what? While yes, Oscar's a gold medalist and Oscar's an absolute legend in the sport, he doesn't have that power now. Those days, that was almost a lifetime ago. It's a different Oscar, and now, he's look. Maybe all of Brazil is going to be interested in that fight. And maybe it does okay. But I think he's got an uphill battle because he's not he's not Tyson. Like I said, he's not Jake or Logan Paul. He's not Floyd Mayweather. He's not Conor McGregor. He's not Anderson Silva even. And so he's going to have. But he was in boxing. Don't get me wrong. But look, I was a boxing fan then. I'm a boxing fan now, and Oscar's reputation just doesn't carry the weight of Floyd or those other guys. And he doesn't carry the anticipation like a Mike Tyson, right? Even though Mike was old and everything, fighting Roy Jones Jr., we were all still kind of on the edge of our seat, wondering, is Iron Mike going to land another knockout? Is Iron Mike going to get a knockout? You don't get that with Oscar De La Hoya. And so is Oscar going to dance and punch and use his footwork and do all that like he used to? No. And so we don't have the anticipation even in that fight. It's just going to be an old Oscar De La Hoya trying not to get knocked out by Vitor Belfort, who's probably back on TRT.
And I wonder, Jeff, too, where did Oscar go wrong? He was the biggest star in the sport, the best looking guy. I remember, and I was married at the time, every time I wanted to buy a pay-per-view, and I'd buy them all, I'd go to, if HBO wasn't flying me out, which they did a lot, I would buy them. And I would sit there, and my wife would get so mad. Who's fighting? Mayweather, you're wasting our money. Who's fighting? De La Hoya. Okay. All the women wanted to buy Oscar's fights. Whenever you bought Oscar's fights as a husband, as a dude, you know what I'm talking about. All the women, when you would go to De La Hoya fights, Jeff, the A-list. You have a Rolodex, you have a little black book back in the day as a guy. Oscar De La Hoya brought out the A-list. Every guy brought the A-list, the first girl in that black book, and started working down. Oscar was that kind of name. He's been passed up and lapped multiple times by Floyd Mayweather. Oscar De La Hoya was the guy. Floyd took that from him. Floyd's like the Snoop Dogg of combat sports. He knows how to keep himself relevant. Oscar never really did. Snoop's on everybody's song. That's how he keeps himself out there. Mayweather's fighting McGregor, hottest guy in the moment in the UFC. Mayweather's fighting Logan Paul, hottest guy on social media. He knows how to keep himself out there. But it's amazing to me that Floyd Mayweather surpassed Oscar De La Hoya by that. Whatever you want to call it, man, it's me to see how much Floyd Mayweather's from Oscar, especially the whole pack, but especially Oscar.
Yeah, Oscar just didn't keep up with the. Look, Oscar retired as a legend in the sport. And he probably didn't see the big picture. He probably didn't see that there was going to be these opportunities. Where Floyd was creating these opportunities. Floyd's a different deal altogether. I mean, Floyd, his primary focus in life is making money. And I feel like maybe Oscar just didn't, he didn't have his finger on the pulse of combat sports. He didn't see where it was going. And now he's trying to play catch up, except you're irrelevant now. There's no catching up. You can never catch up. You're always still just behind. And so I feel like that's probably what happened to Oscar is he just didn't stay, he wasn't as immersed in the sport as Floyd has been all these years. And he wasn't quite, he didn't quite have the entrepreneurial spirit or whatever. He didn't. I mean, he created Golden Boy. Don't get me wrong, but that's in his wheelhouse, right? You're a boxing promoter in the sport of boxing, which you're a boxer. Floyd thinks outside of the box, and Floyd does things differently. And there's only one Floyd. I mean that's there's also that. There's only one Floyd, and there's only one Jake and Logan Paul. These guys are kind of like that. That lightning struck for them. It doesn't happen for everybody else. In fact, it only happens for them. And so it just isn't happening for Oscar. And I don't know, like I said, all of the stuff outside of the sport, I think damaged Oscar probably where it can't be repaired. All the photos and the drugs and the stories and everything. It's Oscar's had a rough go at it, man. I mean, there's no question about that. But yeah, I don't think that Oscar's going to do nearly as well as Floyd did in boxing, or either of the Jake or Logan Paul. It just doesn't have that name value anymore. It's he doesn't even have that name value anymore in the Latino community. Which that was huge. It was Oscar De La Hoya. And now I just feel like he's that guy that we all kind of cringe. Like, is he going to look okay or is he going to not?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. And what's interesting is he was a big part of making Floyd Mayweather the star that Floyd is now. Remember when they fought, they did 2.4 million buys, and most of that was Oscar at that point in time. So he sort of rubbed that celebrity status off on Floyd, and Floyd kind of took what Khabib did against Conor and took that star power and ran with it. And I think back to that fight. When was that, Jeff? That was crap, what year did they fight? Now I'm trying to remember what year Oscar and Floyd fought. It was 2007 or 2008. It was in May. I remember that. And it was just an unbelievable. So Oscar has generated $700 million in pay-per-view income. Floyd's at 1.6 billion. But, you know, you have the McGregor fight and the Logan Paul fight padding those numbers. But when it comes to their actual boxing careers, minus the Pacquiao fight, which was double any other boxing match, but De La Hoya Mayweather broke the pay-per-view record that was Tyson Holyfield too. Oscar was the biggest star in the sport for a while. But you're right, man. It's funny how life has those moments, Jeff. You either catch them or you don't. You either take it or you don't. Connor's great at taking them and riding that wave. Oscar missed it. And you're right. Once you miss it, it doesn't come back. But he's he's worth over $200 million. He generated $700 million in pay-per-view buys. But that's a long time ago. To expect him to carry a guy like Vitor, and I don't even know how the Silva Chavez fight did, but Chavez Sr. was on there against Camacho Jr. I mean, who knows what we're going to see next. But I just think, again, I bring it back to boxing. It's a sad state of affairs for boxing when you don't have big enough stars to carry the sport right now, and you need to go back to that well with the old guys. And Mayweather said it in his press conference after Logan Paul. He said, hey, man, he goes, I'm generating multiple tens of millions more than any other fighter, and it's an exhibition. And he's right. When a guy's in that position, and he's not even fighting anymore, he's just doing exhibitions, boxing really needs another star. Canelo is great with the Mexican audience. You know, you have certain people, Wilder, Fury, I don't think anyone cares. Boxing has not had a real star other than Mayweather in a long time. Oscar might be the last one, and that's a long time ago. We're talking, 2010 was the end of that for Oscar, right around there. That's 10 plus years ago.
Yeah, I mean, Pacquiao's got, especially in his country, I think he's probably more popular than Oscar is at this point, right now in their careers. But he's more recent, and so he's more relevant, and so maybe that just goes without saying. Yeah, man. I mean, Oscar just, like I said, Oscar was the biggest pay-per-view draw. I mean, for him and Floyd to knock off Tyson Holyfield too on the pay-per-view record is insane when you look back on it. And then you project to where we are today, and Floyd's still doing this. Floyd could still do a couple more exhibition fights depending on who he gets them against, because we're all going to tune in until somebody beats him, right? I mean, so there's our anticipation. Who's finally going to knock out Floyd? Who's going to beat him? And so he's always got that going for him. Oscar just doesn't have anything going for him right now. I mean, there's no interest in it. There's no interest. Honestly, if he were to have more of those appearances like on Triller and make a complete ass out of himself a lot more, it would probably generate pay-per-view buys. Right now, there's just no interest, or at least on my part, to see Oscar De La Hoya or Vitor fight. But I'm probably going to tune in, and Brazil's probably going to tune in, and there's going to be a portion of the boxing community that's going to tune in. But it's not going to be anywhere near Jake or Logan Paul or Floyd, or whenever Mike Tyson comes back and does it again.
Yeah, and look, man, when De La Hoya beat Chavez that at Caesar's Palace when he retained his WBC title, that was one of the biggest fights of all time. But his losses, you're right. I mean, Felix Trinidad, Shane Mosley twice, B-Hop, Bernard Hopkins, Floyd, and Manny Pacquiao. And that's it for Oscar De La Hoya. His last fight was December 6, 2008 at MGM Grand Garden Arena. I missed that place. What an incredible building. All those boxing matches and UFC fights over the years, or Mandalay Bay. I've never really warmed up to T-Mobile Arena. It just doesn't have that homey, it doesn't have the atmosphere. It's just a giant mausoleum to me, and it's beautiful, but it just doesn't have the same feel. But in those days, Jeff, and maybe I'm being hard on boxing. You tell me, because you love boxing as much as I do. I grew up on it. My dad and I used to watch Howard Cosell all the time, every week, doing boxing on ABC Sports. And, it was just a big part of my childhood. And we had huge stars when I was growing up. It's the Leonard, Hagler, Hearns, the end of Ali with Larry Holmes. Then along comes Mike Tyson. But De La Hoya, Hopkins, Mosley, Tarver, even Jermaine Taylor, Winky Wright, Lennox Lewis, all those fighters. I mean, Asim Rahman, that was the last era where boxing was really big. And I think back to those days when HBO would fly us out. We'd do our show. They bring all the fighters in, all the analysts in. Boxing did it right. You would be there and you would get Oscar and Floyd and Merchant and Lampley and Mosley and Hopkins and Tarver. They would all come through and do the interviews one by one. It was better than almost any other sport had done. Boxing didn't lose people for that reason. Boxing lost people because they lost the ability to make stars, Jeff. boxing had too many promotions, too many federations, too many belts. The right people aren't fighting each other. And for some reason, that ship sailed and boxing missed out. And now they're using the popularity of the UFC and MMA to try to, use the popularity of those fighters to come back, and even Floyd with Logan Paul. But where's the real boxing star? Who can boxing look to right now and say, you're our guy, you're going to carry us, you're taking us where we need to go? That guy doesn't exist. Nowhere to be found.
No, boxing, there's a lot of reasons why boxing was failing. The competition, for one. And look, I'm a huge boxing fan. I'm from Kentucky. Muhammad Ali's from Kentucky, and we took a hell of a lot of pride in that. And we watch fights constantly. That's all we did. With my dad, we'd listen to the race on Sunday, and we'd watch the fights. On USA Network or whatever they put them on. Saturday night fights. There was the Tuesday night fights. There was fights on. That's just what you did. But I think that the competition changed. Cable changed. I just brought up racing during that time. NASCAR had this big, huge influx. And so the competition in the market, the sports market, went away from boxing and went to other sports. You had even like the X Games grew. I mean, there's been several sports, MMA, that have come into the market and been viable and big. Now, NASCAR is fading, for a lot of the same reasons that boxing is. Not to mention just going around in a circle seems kind of stupid. And I think the environmental attitudes in our culture are changing away. I think NASCAR is going to go away. But, I feel like boxing, at the beginning, it was the NBA, and then college basketball wasn't what it is now. And so boxing kind of had its niche and its stronghold on the sports networks, and then all of these other sports started coming along and started getting viewers and started getting interest. And I felt like that drew away from boxing. And then what you're bringing up, they were unable to manufacture or create these stars. And so they're left with what we're doing now. We're recycling old stars. MMA hasn't got there yet, but, I'm not saying that we won't. We are kind of there. We did do Chuck and Tito 3. That was ridiculous. We are doing certain things. And look, and the reality is, if Ronda wanted to come out of retirement in a decade from now, it'll sell crazy and we'll do it. We're just not there yet at MMA because the sport's not old enough to have those old veterans. But we do have the Ken Shamrocks and Don Fries of the world, but it'd be ridiculous to have them in there fighting. Although Ken Shamrock may very well have a fight coming up. I don't know. But you know what I mean? I feel like that the whole sports landscape changed during boxing's heyday, and boxing didn't keep up. They just didn't keep up. NASCAR's not keeping up now. I don't know that sports, because now we're going through another transition with the streaming devices and the internet that, and the pirating and all that. And so some sports are keeping up, right? That the Paul brothers and Showtime Sports right now, and even Triller are keeping up with the pushing the forefront of sports. What's new, creating new boundaries. The UFC's doing the same thing. But eventually, they're going to get taken over by the next new thing. I feel like that's what happened to boxing, man, is that we got this huge influx of sports entertainment, and boxing was left going, oh shit, we don't have anything after Mike Tyson.
Yep. And they became like Blockbuster Video. How did Blockbuster Video lose to Netflix? The times changed and they didn't change with them. Boxing never changed. To me, boxing never changed. It's still the same sport it was when I was a kid. And you either adapt or die, and boxing has died. And now you're looking at Jake and Logan Paul bringing it back. And I want to show a couple pictures here, Jeff. This was in 2006. I was doing a show on Sirius satellite radio plus 100 stations around the country every day for 3 hours, and the HBO boxing would fly us out. This is the time that I choose to remember Oscar De La Hoya, because he was the biggest star. They brought everybody in, Jeff, including Floyd Mayweather. There's Floyd right there, right? There's Floyd Mayweather. I don't know why you don't want to see my face anyway, but there's Floyd. This is probably right before he did his Top Rank deal. Look at, he's not wearing even a fancy suit. But Oscar De La Hoya, this was one of the proudest moments of my career when I look back right there, the golden boy. And I was like, man, right there, he was the biggest. And the reason I bring this up is because he was the biggest star in the sport, in the room. Everybody else walked in. Hopkins, Tarver, Shane Mosley, Merchant, Lampley, Mayweather, all of them. You name them, they were there. Nobody got the reaction that Oscar De La Hoya did. Nobody opened up a room and walked into a room where everything just came to them and became about them, like the Golden Boy. And I don't want to underestimate him. I mean, who knows? I mean, he's made himself a couple $100 million, but I just can't see anybody buying this fight. There was a time when you wouldn't miss an Oscar De La Hoya fight. This one might not even do 500,000 buys. I'm not convinced it's going to.
No, I'd be shocked if it did that much. Like I said, if he were fighting George St. Pierre, that would have done numbers, because George is a huge star in Canada. He's a huge star in the U.S. Everybody knows who George St. Pierre is. He's a household name, and Vitor Belfort is not George St. Pierre. Now, if you're a hardcore MMA fan, then of course you know who Vitor Belfort is. You know, you followed his career. You remember the infamous cut on Randy's eye that got him the light heavyweight title. You remember him at 19 years old, knocking out Tank Abbott and shit back in the day, and you remember Vitor in Pride, and the fight with Anderson and everything. But if you are not a hardcore MMA fan, then you don't really know who Vitor Belfort is. He's not a household name. He's a household name to MMA fans, but if you're just a boxing fan who knows some MMA, Vitor Belfort's not one of the fighters you know.
Right.
You know your Ronda, your Holly, your McGregor, your Anderson, and your Liddell, and you probably maybe know who Adesanya is now. Maybe. But yeah, boxing just didn't keep up, and it's not the only one. Look, the sports world changed. I mean, I'm old, so I remember like Evel Knievel, man. You remember how many friggin' millions of people would tune in to watch Evel Knievel because it was the only damn thing on TV.
Everything.
And so now,
everyone watched it.
Yeah, well, where's a stunt guy now jumping things? Doesn't exist. It's gone. It's just a gone era. The world changed, entertainment changed, and I think that boxing just got left behind. And I don't know that they'll ever be back. I don't, because where they are right now, they're kind of picking and choosing old retired MMA guys to kind of carry the torch in boxing. The MMA guys are jumping all over it because it's really good money, And so they're like,
Money.
hell yeah, I'll do this, yeah, for the money. But at the end of the day, we're watering down both MMA and boxing and doing these variety shows and weird little matches. Or in my opinion, it takes away from Tyson Fury's fight coming up. It takes away from real world champions, and it takes away from how great the top level of mixed martial arts is, in my opinion. Everybody wants to talk about McGregor fighting Mayweather. They'll talk about that more than Poirier. More than McGregor fighting Poirier. It's just weird. We're in a weird time right now. And what's crazy, Jim, is Triller and boxing are actually leading this weird little movement that we're having right now. It's not MMA. It's not the UFC. And so if I were MMA and Bellator and ONE and all these other organizations, I'd keep a close eye on what's going on, because it's as crazy as it fucking sounds, man. Kim Kardashian and Amanda Nunes would do crazy numbers, and so we're just in this weird little phase right now where we might have some freak show matchups because they sell.
Well, and Amanda Nunes now, I mean, you look at the other organizations, you look at Kayla Harrison and Clarissa Shields, those might be the two toughest opponents that Amanda Nunes could face, right? I mean, if they could make those fights happen. And you talked about Holly Holm coming in, dominating boxing, dominating kickboxing, able to end Ronda Rousey the way she did. But Amanda Nunes beat her, and that was the head kick. So there's a precedent that's been set here. I think the female side of these fights is going to be, you mentioned Kim Kardashian against Amanda Nunes. The female side of things, it could get really interesting because you have a lot of famous athletes. I mean, who wouldn't want to see Megan Rapinoe get in there and throw down? I mean, there's a lot of possibility there on the female side for sure.
Might have Serena Williams come over here and give a forearm. Forearm to somebody's chin. The possibilities are crazy, but that's what I'm saying is we're on the edge of this weird movement. We don't know where it's going to go. We're not clairvoyant, but it's definitely going somewhere. And the model is you get a big name. Experience doesn't even matter. You just get a big name and you promote the hell out of it, and people tune in for the freak show. It's like a car accident that you can't turn away from, but it sells. And so, and if the UFC wants to stick to their guns hardcore, it's the best mixed martial artist against the best mixed martial artist, and that's what we're going to do. That's fine. But the moment that these boxing things start to sell more, then the UFC and MMA has to change, or they're going to be the ones left behind. Like I said, we're in a weird transition phase, in my opinion, in sports. And it's not just MMA, right? I mean, it's not really just MMA. You see it going all over the place. I mean, I'll say that Tim Tebow being signed as a tight end is more about celebrity status than actual football ability, right? And so it goes on in a bunch of sports, man. And who they promote and how they do it, it's kind of crazy. But combat sports is always been something that people enjoyed. Like I brought up, I think it's like MTV Celebrity Deathmatch, except real. Except it's real and it is compelling. I mean, I will tune in.
I love Celebrity Deathmatch. It was great.
I mean, yeah, but I mean, there's celebrities that you can't stand. You know, I loved watching Aaron Carter get knocked out. That was the stupidest matchup. Now, if it goes on that direction, you know, where you have a guy who weighs 130 pounds fighting some guy who weighs 270, that shit shouldn't happen. But if you just want to put Leonardo DiCaprio in there with Brad Pitt, fuck, I'm down. You know, and it'll sell. You know, that's what's so crazy is it'll sell probably 100 million pay-per-view buys. And so combat sports has been turned on its head thanks to Triller and Mike Tyson and the Paul brothers. And so the model has been broken, right? The mode's been broken. Now the tried and true way to promote fights is out the window. Now it's all different. And, I'm not going to say that it's good. I'm not going to say that it's bad. I don't like it. But if that's where sports are going, then that's what we're going to be covering. And that's what everybody's going to be watching. And that's the future of it.
Yep. Without a doubt. And Tyron Woodley wants to fight both Paul brothers. He says he wants to kill Jake and then Logan back to back. Vitor says he's boxing after this fight against Oscar De La Hoya. He wants to box Evander, the real deal Holyfield. So, Vitor, I mean, I'd never bet against him in terms of getting himself out there and, being a part of these big fights. Always has a knack for that since he was not even 20 years old. But, man, it's good for Vitor to be able to make that money. He's a businessman first. And, I appreciate the opportunities that guys get. I just wonder where the line is, Jeff, because Woodley Paul's going to do huge numbers. Either Paul is going to do huge numbers against anyone right now. And eventually the novelty is going to wear off, and they're going to have to be real competitors. I don't know. Maybe it doesn't have to wear off because we love a shit show. Jerry, we love a shit show. We do. Yeah. I mean, what's not to love about a good old-fashioned American shit show?
Yeah. No, and that's really what we're marketing, right? I mean, and I don't know where there's a line. I think the line, there's clear lines. Like you can't put a woman in there with a man. Although I bet that they try to. I bet there's going to be a friggin' organization who does that. And hell, maybe I'm just ignorant of it. There might already have been. But that also goes back to, remember the 70s when Martina Navratilova would, played the man in tennis and beat him? And so that even isn't new. But combat sports is a different deal altogether. But Jim, I don't know where there's the line. I really don't. I think that the line is blurred completely, and I don't know. I mean, Khabib's little friend, whatever the hell his name is, he's like 16 or 17, but looks like he's a baby or whatever.
Yeah.
He's getting ready to fight. He's getting ready to fight.
Henry's gonna fight him. You see all that stuff on social media? Oh my God, this is crazy, Jeff. I know we got to wrap it up. We got a lot of stuff to do. Keep subscribing, liking. Our numbers are going through the roof. All forms of social media, all platforms, and the website, Jeff Cain and crew on MMAWeekly.com. Jeff, before we wrap it up, any final thoughts? You got some other stuff going on in the news. We're going to do our preview show coming up in a day or two, but anything else standing out to you right about now before we wrap it?
No, man. I mean, props to Anderson for being able to extend his career. Because honestly, if it wasn't for the Triller and the Jake Paul and the Floyd shit, Anderson wouldn't be making money right now. And so Anderson was able to extend his career after retiring from MMA in boxing, and he's probably going to be able to do that moving forward. And we're going to see other people do it. And so that's good. That's good. And that wasn't a freak show match. That's what I liked about the last weekend about Anderson Silva against Chavez. That wasn't a freak show match. That was right. Just two guys fighting, So you can do it both ways. I still think the freak show sells better, though.
And how long before Dana White throws his hat in the ring? We know he loves boxing. How long before Dana jumps on something with boxing? And we know he's been wanting to do that for a long time. So I'm excited for that, too. Jeff, it's been a great run with you again today. Anderson, put the pause in that man. Anthony Jones. Yeah, we had a good crowd today. Good people watching online. We love you guys. We appreciate you. Keep coming back. Keep liking. Keep subscribing. The numbers are going through the roof. It's MMA Weekly, the most trusted source in news and entertainment and mixed martial arts for almost 20 years. This has been UFC Fallout. Thanks for being here, guys. I'm Jim Grieshaber. For everyone on our team at MMA Weekly, thank you for being here. We love you. Keep your game tight and your mind right. Jeff and I are